Hi Year 12s. I'm going to try and record a video about our next story. It's 72 Derwents. So if you guys can take out your 72 Derwents, what I'm going to do is I'm going to annotate and talk about the key passages as well as talk about the key themes. Okay. Um, so yeah, if you can have your book out ready to annotate and also maybe a Word document in case you want to write a few things. So just to kind of recap, we are trying to annotate the stories looking at these ideas, and this is on your lesson plan. Conflict, and we're always asking ourselves, where does that conflict come from? What is the cause of that conflict? And what is the consequence of that conflict? Sometimes we are looking at communication. We are looking at into an insight in the relationship, like what's actually going on. We are looking at change and what is the cause and consequence. It's always those two of that change, and forgiveness and connection. Again, what was the cause of that forgiveness? And what is the consequence of that connection? Those things I want you guys to keep making notes on and keep writing about, because you will have to write a text response essay at some stage. I don't think it's going to be next week, but you're going to have to be able to talk about the different kinds of conflict that occur in the stories. Okay. So that's what we are trying to annotate in this story. We are also looking at key language features that you guys can write with, because your SAC is going to be a creative SAC where you are writing from the perspective of one of the characters in any of these stories. So far, you guys have looked at Like a House on Fire, Flexion, Static, and that was in the last week. A few people didn't come to that, but we've done it. And I've written a lesson plan up on that if you guys access your lesson plans from last term. Last lesson we did waiting, and this lesson is going to be 72 Derwents. So we've covered 5 stories. So I'm hoping that you guys are making notes on things that I have talked about, as well as looking at my student booklet and highlighting some of the quotes, having a go at writing practice pieces and practice paragraphs that I have set you. I am kind of halfway with correcting your holiday homework. So hopefully I'll get that back to you shortly so you'll have a little more clarity on that as well. Okay, the first bit we are going to look at in 72 Derwents is, hold on a sec. It's from page 240. Actually, sorry, we'll go from the first page because I want to introduce you to a motif. This story is from the perspective of Tyler, who, compared to all the other stories in this book, is a child. So a unique aspect of 72 Derwents is that it's from the perspective of a child. And that actually is really key in highlighting and escalating the tension in this story, because there is a little bit of suspense. And it's because Tyler is a kid. She doesn't know what's going on, but we who are adults and who are reading the story, we know what's going on. So her not knowing but us knowing creates a lot of tension. So if you guys wanted to write a creative story, you are more than welcome to try and experiment with using a child, one of the children, as a character, and Tyler's a good one. In this story, there is a sister called Ellie, and that is a good one to write from the perspective of. So Tyler says, in the first page, Mrs. Carlisle has 2 budgies, a boy and a girl, and they have built a nest. If they have baby budgies, and if I'm allowed, she will give me one. You have to wait until they're old enough to leave the nest before you can take them away from their parents. In my mind, I can picture this. The babies would live in a soft little nest inside a milk carton Mrs. Carlisle has put into their cage as a nesting box. The nest for the budgies is soft because I think the mother bird pulls out some feathers out of her chest to put inside. This seems cruel, but Mrs. Carlisle says she puts other soft things in the cage, and the mother budgie didn't want any of them. She is using instinct. The babies would all be snuggled up inside. If she will give one to me, I would like a girl budgie. I think I would name her Alicia. This is a motif. A motif is an image, just like in static, there was a motif of the couch. It is an image that reoccurs a few times in this story. So the motif of the budgies reoccurs a few times. Now, this motif foreshadows what is going to happen in this story. So if you read closely, it says here, the mother bird pulls some of her own feathers out as a nest for the baby. And so it really talks about protective instincts and how the mother budgie didn't want anything else. She only wanted to use her own feathers. So it talks about a mother's instinct in this story. If you've noticed, a lot of the stories in Like a House on Fire look at mothers and, their ability to have a baby, like we saw in Waiting, their ability to protect the family, provide for the family, all of that stuff, and what conflicts can occur. And this is another one that looks at mothers. So that's worth annotating. And if you are writing in this story, it's worth talking about this motif of the birds. Okay, we're going to flip to page 240, which is the next page. No, we don't want to download anything. Okay, now in this passage I'm going to read, which is 240 to 242, I think. Hold on, let me just double check what I have said. 244. We don't want to do this. We are introduced to Shane, who is the antagonist or the bad guy in this story. And so I'll just read this out. My mum says to him, "Do you like him?" Shane, I mean. She has on her nice earrings. "He's okay," I say. Later on, when Shane comes over, Mum is in the kitchen cooking dinner. She's made homemade lasagna and now she's heating up oil in the deep saucepan. She calls to Shane, "You haven't lived till you've had my home cooked chips. I'm famous for them. Isn't that right, Tyler? My home cooked chips?" Once I asked if I could get some money and go and buy a hamburger, and she suddenly jumped up really angry and said, "Why do you need a crap takeaway burger? I can make you a much better hamburger here at home." She got mince out and made a hamburger in a fry pan with onions. It took forever. And at last she gave it to me with 2 pieces of bread holding it all together. "Isn't that better than Macca's?" she kept asking. "Isn't it? Answer me." You will notice that when there's conversations going on here, there's no quotation marks. We've talked about dialogue before, but here the conversation is not in quotation marks. So when you guys write from characters' perspective in this story, don't use quotation marks because it's not used here. This is a side story, but my mum also, when I asked for Macca's, she would say, "Nah, we can make you Macca's at home." And then she'd make me like a burger with bread. And it was so bad, but for some reason she'd want to do that. Anyway, now I just say yes. Mrs. Carlisle told us that when you're training your dog, you just need to say the same thing over and over until the dog gets it. He wants to do the right thing, he just doesn't know it at first. She says it's the same with training a bird to talk. And that's true, and maybe it's true for people too. If you notice, Tyler is always talking about Mrs. Carlisle. And so Mrs. Carlisle is her teacher and seems to be probably one of the most positive adults in her life, because you will notice that she doesn't have a very good household. "I'm starving," says Shane, and looks over at me with a smile. He's just out of the shower and there are comb marks in his hair. He says, "You want to change channels?" and leans over to give me the remote. You have to press the button really hard to make it change channels now because it's wearing out. So I change it to watch The Simpsons. What grade are you in? He says, and I tell him grade 6, Mrs. Carlisle's class, 6C. She comes in and says, how are you this morning, my treasures? My lovely 6Cs. I've missed you. I don't tell Shane this. Grade 6, he repeats. When Homer and Marge talk to each other, their whole heads move to ask a question and then answer. But when Shane talks to me, just his eyes move sideways. His head stays watching TV. He says, I bet you've got a boyfriend. I can hear my mum clattering oven trays in the kitchen. On the TV, Bart is climbing up to his treehouse. He can go really fast, much faster than I could in real life. Just a few steps and he's there. But I always like to see the inside of his treehouse. I wish I had one, and I don't want a boyfriend. I want the set of 72 Derwents. They are in a tin that opens out with all the sharp points of the pencils in order and in every colour you could ever think of using. Georgia has some at school, and even when you sharpen them, they feel special. The wood is so soft, and it peels back to leave the pencil as good as new. My grandma asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I took her to the shop where they are. The art supply shop smells so beautiful inside, all clean, new pencils and paper and brushes. She had a good look at them. For your colouring in, she says. I felt happy when we walked out. Again, imagining. They have names soft as feathers: pale mint, sea green, grey, French grey, rose pink, cloud blue. And she keeps going. So you can see that she's a child. Her thought patterns is different to the other characters we've seen. She thinks about The Simpsons. She's hearing Shane weirdly asking her about boyfriends. Then she kind of thinks about 72 Derwents, and then she thinks about the time her grandma took her to the shop. So in a couple of your pieces of writing, I have talked about the fact that you guys can flash back to memories in the past, because when you are thinking about something, or when your character is thinking about something, you're not always in the present moment. You're always thinking about past memories or something that's worrying you in the future. And so that's what you've got to write in as well. One thing that I've hoped you also have noticed is that Shane is really creepy. He's asking a grade 6 girl if she's got a boyfriend rather than kind of other innocent things. Let's keep going here. You have got a boyfriend, haven't you? Says Shane. I can tell because you're blushing. In cartoons, time passes really fast and sudden. Also, things happen that aren't true. Like a cat will be running along and will go through the wall, and there'll be an exactly cat-shaped hole left behind the wall. Mum's old boyfriend, Gary, threw a bottle at the wall once, and it didn't leave a shape like that, it just smashed. So with this information, we can see that Mum has had abusive boyfriends in the past, and we can also see that Shane is creepy. So what the author is doing here is setting up a scene. We can also see that Tyler is really innocent. She doesn't care about boyfriends and stuff yet. She just wants her set of pencils, her 72 Derwents, in that little tin, because she loves to draw and she thinks that the names of the colors are really pretty. So I'm going to run out of time in this video, so I'll jump into a next one. So this will be part 1. All right, thanks guys. How do I stop this?